All right, welcome to Little Pod That Could. My guest today is Jake Fohn, Salem, used to be a Salem resident, former South Salem athlete, legend. We'll have him talk a little bit about that. Jake, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for having me on, man.
For sure. And this is my first morning one, and I'm notoriously not a morning person, not very talkative in the morning, so we'll see. It's going to take me a little while to get going, but I think just judging by the research I've been doing on you, I think we're in for a good time today. Um, First, could you maybe tell people a little bit about you, sort of like where you came from, how you got to where you're at, and then we'll talk specifically about the Ironman stuff later. But maybe just to provide some context for people, give a little background on who you are.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Grew up in Salem, went to South Salem High School, played football, basketball, and baseball at South. Um, Baseball was actually my favorite sport. I know, Kevin, maybe you can attest to this on the basketball court. Wasn't much of a finesse player, was more of a defensive guy, a role player.
Yeah, yeah, I can attest to that. I would say bordering on kind of like Patrick Beverly type action. That's how I kind of viewed you. But I mean, you probably saw yourself as like a. I'm trying to think who like the lockdown defenders are that aren't Patrick Beverly. Uh, like
I
Draymond,
mean,
maybe.
yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't know if I would compare but I think the point is, I felt like I always had a strength on the defensive side of the court, and
Sure.
I think of the team that I was on at South, we had a lot of football guys, so it was kind of a rougher bunch, but yeah, so I mean, I really enjoyed when we played against you guys at McKay. It was always a really gritty game, to say the least, right? I felt like
Yeah.
we always put it all out there.
Yeah, it was always a battle. And the other thing too is that you kind of had the unique thing. Like most of the time, athletes aren't involved in like choir, or, other like fine arts type stuff. But you were in choir too, right?
Yeah, and I got into choir at Leslie in middle school. One of our assistant football coaches was actually the choir teacher.
Oh wow.
His name was Lee Kierkegaard, and he got a lot of the football players to come out for choir. So I started choir when I was in seventh grade, but my my dad was like, when I grew up, I had always heard stories that my dad was in choir in high school and stuff like that, and so I'd always had a desire to kind of do more with music, and it wasn't until I didn't necessarily have the drive to like get into it myself. It was really nice that I had somebody that kind of reached out and kind of helped nurture me into the middle school choir, at least to start. But I'll tell you what, man, in high school at South, I was in the jazz choir and the symphony choir, and that is actually my most proud high school achievement. Was in 2009, we won the state championship in choir, and it was unlike any feeling I've ever had. Like to
Hmm.
get to the end, and like it was a really cool thing.
Hmm. Why was that so much more meaningful than like whatever sports accomplishments or academic accomplishments you had?
Yeah, I think you know on the sports fields, um, as more of the sometimes the leader of the team, there was a different pressure and just different things that came with being a captain or whatnot. And in the choir, I was just a role player, right? I was really
Hmm.
just a piece of the team. And I think our choir, I'm probably off, but probably about 75 to 100 people.
Wow.
And so it really felt special to just be a part of something that, like, I was not really driving. I was just a team member. And I think that it made it feel really special when we did get to the end, and it was a pretty cool experience.
Hmm. Okay. And your dad actually, he has an interesting role in Salem too, because he was planning all of the River Rock concert series, right?
Yeah, it's actually goes back in my family a little ways. My grandpa had a company called EJD. He was a teacher at Waldo, and
Okay.
he started putting on concerts for kind of the youth, and he was doing them at out at the fairgrounds, at the armory, and he started that business. My dad started to work with him a little bit, but kind of broke off into his own, taking some fairs. But my dad's also the director at the Elsinore Theater, so my dad has quite a musical bone, I would say, too, where he really enjoys music, and I think it's cool for me to see him, giving that back to Salem, and like River Rock was one example of just trying to bring music to downtown.
When I mean that his roles in that have probably been tough since the pandemic, right? I mean, because there's nothing really to plan, or that's gonna be. Is that stuff ramping back up? Because it does seem like, I mean, we're probably heading towards some restrictions again here as it's the beginning of August. But I mean, because River Rock didn't happen again this year, right?
Yeah, they didn't do it last year or this year.
Right.
I think kind of just due to whatever was going on. But
Sure.
I know at the theater they have shows booked, and I think that everyone is just trying to feel out what's going to happen over the next few months, and I think that it's a pretty delicate industry to be in, and I know he's been working super hard to really keep his team engaged. He's kept his whole team on board, and it's been hard where they not a lot going on in terms of like doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I think that his main thing during the pandemic is just trying to keep his really strong team together and not lose anybody, which he's been able to do. So I think that's his thing, where he's like super stoked just about that fact alone.
Sure. Okay, so we got sidetracked. So you
Yeah,
go
yeah.
to, and I have a story about your grandpa too. I met him at Busey
Really?
Court. Yeah, one time like years ago. And he was like, I don't know how we got talking. I was telling him I coached at McKay. He was like, "Oh, my grandson plays at South," and I'm like, "Oh." I'm like, "Please don't be phone. Please don't be phone." I'm like, "Who's that?" It's like, Jake Fohn. I'm like, "Oh, cool." And I remember he was like, his reaction to my reaction was like, And he's like, "Yeah, he's a little rough." I was like, "Yeah, he's a little rough." But he was a super nice guy. I was like, man. So
he always had my back, and I'm not surprised that I'm glad you kept it real with him, because he knew that I was a physical player. But that's funny that you ran into him. But yeah, so I know we got a little sidetracked, but I really enjoyed playing baseball.
okay.
But looking back on my time as a baseball player, all my life I had kind of a fatal flaw, right? I felt like I was pretty good hitting up at the plate, and I had a good glove, but I could just never throw the damn ball across the infield.
Okay.
I was a little bit of a head case, and I never really worked on that specific aspect of my game. And so when I started to go to college, like whatever they're called, like the recruiting events, I did well in everything, but all the coaches told me like, "Hey, your arm's not strong enough to play at the college level, or maybe strong enough but not accurate enough." And so I ended up getting more offers to play football, which football was like, I love playing football, but I just wasn't at the time as passionate about it as baseball. And so I got the opportunity to play football at a small NAI school in the Bay Area, which I really only picked. Do you know much about Menlo College, or kind of where it's
Not
located?
at all. No.
Yeah, it's a small. I mean, when I graduated from South, it was about 2,000 kids, and Menlo College had about 700.
Oh wow.
So a really small school, but I really only chose it. I had a couple offers to play small school football, right? Not anything big, but it was the only school in California, and I kind of wanted to just get down to the sun a little bit, so it made my decision pretty easy.
Well, and the Bay Area is incredible, so yeah, I mean, that's a good decision.
Yeah, and Menlo, it's a school that only has business majors, so I just picked one business major and kind of got to see a little bit of everything. It ultimately turned out to be a really great experience, but definitely an interesting, super small school that I initially just kind of picked due to the location.
And so you go there, you graduate with a degree in accounting, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then
do I look like an accountant?
No, but you became an accountant, right?
Yeah, I worked for a public accounting firm, KPMG, for 4.5 years.
Okay.
And I'll tell you what, man, I was a decent student in high school. Just I worked decently hard to get good grades, but I never really excelled at anything, or didn't feel like. When I got to college, kind of learning some of the real world, tangible things about accounting, it just kind of made sense to me, and I enjoyed it.
Okay. And so is that what you're doing now?
No, I actually work for a startup called Pilot that is building software tools on top of QuickBooks Online. So we do bookkeeping for small and medium-sized businesses.
Okay. So you basically integrate into QuickBooks software and add extra features and stuff like that?
Yeah, exactly right. And the way that I like to describe it is we're building tools for our bookkeepers to use that make certain processes a bit more automated. And so ultimately, the things that our customers care about are just the fact that we're doing the service for them, because people don't want to have to do bookkeeping. It's kind of painful and tedious.
Right.
And so we're delivering a service, and we're also building some software tools as well.
Okay. And so are you still living in the Bay Area?
Yep. Yeah, I'm in San Francisco. I live near Golden Gate Park, but I came back when the Ironman, I know we can get into it in a bit, but I came back to kind of train for a few weeks and stay at my parents' house in Salem.
Okay. And that's kind of where, because it's been a long time since we've even talked, and we were texting back and forth and prepping for the pod. I was trying to remember how we even, because you don't dislike kids from other, man, that kid's, but I wasn't a huge Jake Fohn fan, but at some point I became a Jake Fohn fan, but I don't remember what happened. And just, it's been forever since we've talked, and going back through the research, I was kind of watching some of your old clips, some of your old YouTube stuff, and I was remembering, I'm like, oh yeah, brought up the little Eddie thing, which I kind of was, but I was thinking, if you had been born a couple years later, you'd probably be TikTok famous. You know what I mean? The little Eddie thing, you did shows, right?
I don't know if I would put plural shows. I would say maybe I did a show. I mean, yeah, I do. I mean, it's the whole world of TikTok today. I feel like an old head in the sense that I still don't really get it, right? And which is sad to say, but yeah, I mean, I did. I think it kind of ties together with being in choir. I've always had an itch to do something musical, and a little bit of rapping that was not great. A funny story: I rode my bike a few weeks ago downtown Salem, grabbed a coffee and a croissant, and the woman behind the counter, she's like, "I think I know you." And oftentimes when I get that, it's often aren't you Connor Phone's big brother? Somebody younger that my brother knew, because I didn't recognize this woman, and she's like, "Aren't you little Eddie?" And I'm not kidding you. It really threw me through a loop. I was like, A, I haven't heard that name in years, and B, just this random person that I personally didn't know. It kind of took me back.
And I hadn't even thought about that. It was it came out of nowhere. I'm like, wait, wasn't he? I was I think he was doing some rap stuff. I think his name was Lil Eddie. What the heck is that? I actually texted you kind of to verify that was right, and I wasn't just being old and crazy. But it did kind of make me think that kind of shows a little bit about you even as a high school kid, because a lot of times, in high school, a lot of times you're really insecure and not really sure of yourself, and you were always willing to do things that maybe, like as a kid from Salem, becoming a rapper, but it became like I remember people were like stoked on it. Like for a while there, Lil Eddie was hot in Salem.
I think what really happened was I had one song that wasn't like terrible, and then I had one song, and then I made like 100 tank tops with my face on them, and I think I did like a little marketing campaign around myself as somebody that was making music, but it was never really the music. I don't think that was any good at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I feel all right with like lyrically coming up with stuff. I enjoyed that, but I think I just did a pretty big marketing campaign around it, which is why there may have been some buzz. It was all hype.
Right. But like, there's a couple things in there that are interesting. One, it taught you a lot about marketing. You know what I mean? Two, it like, the skills that you were developing musically ended up helping you in college, helped you make money on a promo video. It's like the fact that you're out there trying things and, being willing to like fail or be, look silly or whatever. Like, those are like valuable skills for entrepreneurs and successful people in business. So, like, I guess I a lot of times overthink small things, but I do think like that was kind of a revealing look. I'm like, dang, he was like that even as a high school kid. He was making those moves, and honestly, to have one song that's not terrible, in 2009, it was a big deal. The technology wasn't nearly as good as it is now. Now you can, download beats off YouTube, and microphones are cheaper. It's much more available for people to create music now than it was when you were doing it. So I do think like that's, I don't know. I was just in thinking through that. That's pretty impressive.
Well, Kevin, I appreciate you saying that, man.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've thought about it in that way, but
right.
I can tell you, I did have some feedback that I was not good, right, from a couple people in my life. Specifically, I'll never forget. I made my first song. I just recorded it off my MacBook, right? I didn't have a microphone. I just copped a Mac Miller beat and, kind of went from there. Which, shout out to Mac Miller. He was a big influence for me. But I remember my dad took me to a store in Portland, and we were, like, buying a microphone. And it was a couple $100, right? I was getting all the cables and the audio to hook it up to my MacBook. And he said, hey, buddy, like, before we spend a couple $100 on this, I just want you to know, like, you can chase your dream, but you're not very good at this. Like, is this something that you want to do? And my dad's in the music business. And so it made me laugh. I was like, I knew he supported me, but he was like, I would not book you. You are not good enough. And so I always knew in the back of my mind that it was more about just for me, kind of just having a creative outlet.
So you're saying there's no Lil Eddie album in the works, no EP, no SoundCloud mixtape that's coming out?
I think coming out in the future, in the near future, no. But I had I think I put together around 20, 25 songs, and I burnt a bunch of mixtapes for my friends, right? Like, just back in the day, handwritten, notes on the burnt copy. I'm pretty sure there's only one that exists that I'm still aware of, because all my other songs are pretty much gone. My MacBook died. And so I think that there's only one individual that actually still has the music out there.
Is that your mom?
No, it's actually Colin Hoon.
Oh, really? Okay. Shout out to Colin.
Keeping the
archives. Okay, so now that we've settled little Eddie, but maybe eventually it could be a little older Eddie. You could come out. But
I feel like I would rebrand if I came back. But
okay, tell me about that. What would you rebrand as?
Oh, I haven't thought of it at all.
Okay, okay.
In my mind, Little Eddie kind of brings back not the best memories, right?
Oh,
In
damn.
the sense
My
that
bad. My bad.
no, you're cool. Just in the sense that like, you know, I think that I love making music, but I don't know if rapping is what I should be doing. You know, I don't know if I'm a good rapper.
I do think, I honestly though, like it was impressive to me, like just to think through someone at that age being like, yeah, it's cool. Like maybe I'm not great at this, but let me just try and see what happens. Like that's not the typical 17, 18-year-old. That's not how they function. So anyway, that was honestly the only reason I wanted to bring it up, because I did think like it does give some context to who you are as a, you know, as like a driven person who's not afraid to take chances. So speaking of which, segue. Ooh, so when does the idea of like spending a full day just beating your body up, when does that become like, hey, this would be something I really want to do? Like, how did you decide to do a half Ironman?
Yeah. I got a pretty good group of buddies that I cycle with in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
And during COVID, man, it was like the only way we could, you know, kind of get out of the house was getting on the bike and just ripping out of town. And we did a couple longer rides. Specifically, one day we did a century, so we put together a 100-mile route, and it took about 8 hours. It was a pretty grueling day, but when we're like in the moment, there was a couple times where like, you know, I just was like really felt like I was at my best and like having a great day. Like I'm tired, my body's sore, you know, you're kind of battling through a lot of different things. And I got home that night and I was like, just had this high, like so much energy where I was like, wow, like that felt really good. And so over the next few months, that same group of friends, which I met most of them in college at Menlo, we just started doing more longer activities, rides, and things like that. And it was actually a guy in that group that said, "Hey, Fohn, aren't you from Salem?" I'm like, "Yeah." And most of the time when people say that in California, like it always goes back to like the witch capital, or we're talking about, you know,
Okay.
the upper northeast. I feel like people aren't often like bringing up Salem, Oregon, but he sent me the link. He said, "Hey, they're doing an Ironman in your hometown. I think it's the first Ironman in Oregon." Right? And that's kind of how I found out about it.
Okay. And when did you pick up cycling? Because I didn't, it was like all of a sudden I just started seeing you riding on Instagram, but it didn't seem like that wasn't something you did in high school, right? Did you pick that up in college?
Yeah, in college, I got an aunt and uncle that are in the Bay Area. Shout out to my uncle Greg. He's an incredible dude, and he used to ride like amateur, but like professionally, right? In the United States, like he was getting after road cycling. And once I finished playing football, him and I started riding about 3 mornings a week while I was still in college. And he's the one that really got me into it.
Okay. Interesting. So you hear there's an Ironman in Oregon. Was this the first one ever in Oregon?
I believe so.
Okay.
And that could be incorrect, but I know it was the first one in Salem, and I think it's a whole process to get it approved. I think they'd had it in the works for like 5 years just to get it approved.
Wow. Okay. So is it just the fact that it's in Salem, you're like, okay, I'm in? Or, I mean, do you look and go, wow, because I feel like what I've heard about Ironmans is usually the swimming is what scares people the most. Because, you know, like for you, you're an experienced cyclist, so I'm sure the cycling side of it probably wasn't like, you're like, oh, okay, it's 56 miles, but it's not like you've obviously done twice that in a day, so it's not that big a deal. But, you know, were you worried about any part of that, or how much thought did you put into, do I want to do this, or did you just say, yeah, let's try and see what happens?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it was weird when I found out about it. I got like a kind of a pit in my stomach, like a nervous feeling to some extent, where I was like, ooh, like this sounds cool, but like it makes me nervous. You know, and it was that feeling. I slept on it for a week, where I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna do this, you know, because I feel like as I've gotten older, you don't get that many opportunities to feel that same bug in your stomach that makes you nervous, right? So I kind of took that as an opportunity, and I just said, something about this is making me feel nervous. I'm gonna sign up for it and give it a go.
Okay. So you mull it over for a week, decide you're gonna do it. What was the part that you were most excited about, and what was the part that scared you the most?
Yeah, the thing I was excited about was I just figured it would be cool to do something in my hometown. Right? I think the fact that it was in my hometown, I had a little bit of like, got to come home and protect my home turf a little bit. Not that I was planning to do well or anything, but just kind of like, the bike course, it's right out my window here. It comes right by my house in South Salem. So like when I looked at the course, I was like, wow, this is kind of in my neck of the woods. But the thing that made me nervous, Kevin, you said it directly right, was the swim.
Yeah.
The swim, man.
Okay. Because were you, like, how would you rate your swimming prior to this on a scale of 1 to 10? Were you like an avid swimmer, never in the water, couldn't swim? Like, where were you at?
I'm not a good swimmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like a 3 out of 10?
3 out of 10. I mean,
3 out of 10. Wow.
I'd say 3. Yeah, my mom swam. My mom swam at South Salem High School. She was a really good swimmer. Had some great success there, and so I know that I got the swimming genes, or I should be able to swim. But just nothing ever more than like a leisurely swim on a weekend. I guess I could say is about my experience.
Okay, so then how do you plan a training program? Like, what did you buy a book, look at Reddit? Like, how do you prep for this event?
It's a good question. And now having done it, I can say that I took away so much from it that I would do differently next time. But I bought a couple books. Iron War is a great book about like a very famous Ironman battle between Mark Allen and Dave Scott. But I also read a couple others that were like very focused on how to train, how to prepare. I watched a ton of YouTube as well. Just like at night.
Was there one source that you were like, because I've actually had a couple friends go down there that day, and a couple of them were inspired, like, man, like this, because is the event coming back again to Salem, or yeah. So I've had a couple friends like, maybe I should try that. So, when I told them you were coming on, they're excited because they're like, oh man, we can hear about the training and all. So is there a source that you, like, YouTube like channel or a book that you were like, hey, this really helped me, and I'm really interested to know like what you learned after doing it, but was there a source leading up to it that you were like, hey, this was really helpful in preparation?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is that it's all kind of about what your body, like how much your body can take, and it's going to be different for everybody. And so I felt like for me, I try to pull together all these different sources because I signed up about 9 weeks out. And so I figured everything that I had read was like, you needed about an 8-week training block. But that's an 8-week training block if you're already in pretty good shape, right? Yeah. And so the way that I thought about it, I try to pull together different sources. But for me personally, just from having been on the bike a lot over the past few years, I know that about 100 miles on the bike a week is kind of where my legs start to really break down. And so I built a program where, and again, I didn't have a lot of information other than what I was pulling together, but I started with about a baseline of 80% of what I thought my max was on the bike. So I was targeting 80 miles a week on the bike, and then the run, I'd never done a half marathon before, so I figured I should be running about 15 miles a week. So I'm used to running that long every week, but I was chunking it out into like 3 runs a week. Sure. And then the swim, I just figured as much as I can swim, I think it'll be helpful. But looking back now, in some of these, like some of the sources that I pulled together, right, I was riding 80 to 100 miles a week, but like people that are training for the actual full Ironman are doing 500 miles a week, right?
Jeez.
I was swimming about 5,000 yards a week. People that are like really getting after it are swimming about 15,000 yards a week, right? So going into it, I knew that I was training a lot less than I think like the pros are doing. But I think that's where you can get into trouble, is if you pick up just like a YouTube channel, or like you don't kind of plan for how your body's going to feel. You're going to overtrain, and then ultimately the overtraining is what's going to lead to getting injured and not being able to do the thing at all.
And so do you think that you had overtrained, or were you kind of undertrained, or right in the sweet spot for like your body?
Yeah, I mean, based on the time that I ran in the Ironman, I think that I put together a decent plan for my body, but there's still a ton of things that I would change if I were to do one again.
Yeah, let's get into that. And then I also want to talk about the actual experience itself, but what would be the things you changed, if you could do it again? And do you plan on doing it again?
I do plan on doing the Salem Ironman again next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what would you do differently?
Yeah, I think differently I would, a couple things. I need to swim more. I think I just didn't swim enough. And Kevin, swimming's hard, man. And it's just boring.
Yeah, it's super hard. Yeah,
personally, like, I think I know that they have like you can listen to music in the pool if you get like a Bluetooth connection or something.
Even those are like weird though, like because I was swimming at the courthouse for a while, and there was a couple people there that had those, and even asking them, they were like, they work okay, so, and it just seemed like a hassle. You had to like tuck stuff under, and like it's like, this is just too much, but. It does get tedious, without any kind of music or anything. You're just like swimming.
Yeah, and too, like, I would swim in the morning when I first started training. The rest of my day would be wiped. Like, I just feel like it takes a different, like, I have so much respect for swimmers after swimming for just about 6 weeks. It's so hard on the body, and it's just tough on the mind. You got to be really mentally tough to get into the pool and put like an hour workout together.
Have you thought about doing that there's like another swim system that Tim Ferriss was big on? I can't remember what it's called. If you're interested, I'm sure I can find it for you, but it's like a more energy. It uses less energy. A bunch of like swimmers like, but like if you're just trying to like compete in an Ironman, you don't care about swimming. Supposedly this helps. Tim Ferriss said he couldn't swim at all and then became like this, proficient swimmer doing this. I can't remember what the name of the thing is, but yeah, I can pass a line. Did you look at anything like that, or did you take swim lessons, or like nothing? Okay.
No, yeah, and I think when we're talking about things I would change, right, I put in the work myself, but I think as we all kind of know, if you've never done something, you can put in time, but like, was I putting in good time? Was it valuable? Right. Was I actually getting better? Like, those things I'm not really sure about.
So would you hire a swim coach this time around?
Yeah, there's I'm blanking on the name, but there's a group that does open water swim lessons in Salem.
Okay.
And I wish I did some open water swim training, more of it, and yes, I wish I had kind of hired a coach. But I think that the way that I kind of thought about it was, I'm just going to try this on my own and see how it goes. And then there's a lot of things that I could tweak if I were to ever do it again to compete better, to do things differently. So kind of setting a baseline for myself was helpful. But man, the swim was just like every day I had to swim, I was just like, not in the best mood. So I was like, I don't really want to even be getting in the pool and putting the time in right now. So that was a good thing to push through mentally.
Okay, so what else are you gonna tweak going forward?
Running, I think I told you I was trying to hit 15 miles a week, but I was chunking it out into like, a long day, a short day, and like a medium day. And the first time that I'd ever ran a half marathon was the day of the race, and I think that was a mistake.
Yeah.
I probably should have done a few days where I got close. Like the longest I ran was 8 miles. And so I wish that I pushed it to, 10 or 11, like gotten closer. I don't think you don't need to run a half marathon to do a half marathon, but I wish that I had trained, because my legs kind of fell off once I got to mile 10. I felt a drop, and so I think that's something that I would put more time in on next year.
Okay. Anything else, or are those the two big things?
I think for me personally, those are the big things. But I think if there's anyone listening that, I had a couple people reach out to me too on Instagram saying like, hey man, I'm going to do the Ironman next year. Like, would love to get some tips. The most important thing is when you're putting volume on your body, like some of the training days that I would do, it's 5-6 hours of training in a single day, right? Jeez. It's a couple hours on the bike and then a couple hours running. It was really important that I was doing core work 3 days a week and corrective stretches and exercises with bands 5 mornings a week. Like, I think when you start to put that many miles on your legs, I think that's when you're going to start to feel like stuff's breaking down. And I can't overemphasize how important I think it was that I was doing some corrective exercises in the morning or before my activities, just to make sure that my legs were functioning in the right way and not just like going out there stiff and putting in the work.
Okay. And what was the impact on your personal life? Because I mean, if you're spending 5 to 6 hours a day training plus working, I'm assuming, like, what was the impact on you personally?
Yeah, I'd say this is the hardest part, is that it was something I was very passionate about, but it affects kind of everybody else around you, where it takes a lot of time. And, when I'm doing my trainings, it's like those are the moments that I want to really be up for and have the energy for. But then how do I make sure that I have the energy to be around my family and be around my friends and be a good family member and just a good friend? That was hard, Kevin. I mean, I had to really be super thoughtful about just the moments that I was in and making sure that I wasn't letting some amateur event, for me personally, I know there was a lot of professionals there, but not letting something like that get in the way of just like being a good dude.
Well, and even though it's an amateur event, like as a competitor, I can imagine it doesn't feel like an amateur event for you. Like your preparation didn't feel amateurish. You approached that as I would expect. And so that's why I was just curious to know, like, because you're right. Like you were saying, after when you swam, the rest of the day you were wiped. It seems like it would be hard to give like any kind of emotional energy to anybody, or, so I'm just kind of curious. And sometimes that happens, fighters talk about that a lot in UFC too, where it's just like kind of a lonely existence when you're training like that, when you're prepping for a big competition. Did you experience any loneliness like that at all, or how was?
Yeah, I mean, I would describe it, I think loneliness is a fair term, but it's almost more of like, doing something like this that takes a lot of time. Like what's it all for, right? If it's like affecting all these other areas of my life, or if I let it affect these other areas of my life, like kind of what's the point of it? And so I think, it definitely, I would say the thing that helped me the most was, I've been doing a lot of meditation, and I think that when I'm doing that type of work, I'm trying to be thoughtful about all the other people in my life that are potentially not getting what they need from me, and just trying to be super mindful about each day how I could be giving up more of myself, to try and make sure that I'm not just like siloed and alone doing the training, because like you're saying, it's a lot of alone time, and especially during the Ironman itself, it's a lot of alone time in your own mental pain cage. And that feeling, it's something that I really enjoy personally, but like it's a delicate balance, and I think if you're not super careful about how you're training and being thoughtful, it's easy to kind of I think the tough thing for like a UFC fighter or something like that is like they're so heavily focused on watching their diet and their weight. And I think that is a completely different mental piece of the game that I didn't necessarily experience, because as an endurance athlete, quote unquote, you can kind of put whatever in your body that you want, and it's okay to some extent. And so I think that being a UFC fighter, somebody that has to like put in the work, but then also has to be really strict with your diet and what you're eating. I think all that together, man, is it's a recipe for just a really mentally tough few months.
Speaking of like what you're putting in your body, like did you have like what were you doing eating wise? Was it just kind of like what do you normally eat? Did it change at all? Like kind of maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. I think the most relevant thing is I didn't really change what I was eating, but when you're doing an Ironman and it's going to take 6 or 7 hours to do the half, you have to eat about 1,500 calories during the race. And so I had to start working on eating while I was working out, like being on the bike and just throwing back bars and things like that. I had to really change the way that I thought about working out, because you have to be able to sustain that entire thing. But in terms of like the only thing that I really cut back on was just drinking before the event. I didn't drink for a few weeks, just wanted my body to not have any toxins and stuff like that. But I didn't change up much in terms of like what I was eating.
Okay. And can we circle back to your meditation practice? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I do it every morning. It's the first thing that I do every day. And for me, somebody I feel like I get pretty excited about things. It's really easy for me to get maybe overly excited, and something I've been trying to work on as I've gotten older is just realizing when I'm worked up, realizing when I'm going too fast or going faster than the moment needs, and meditation has helped me kind of slow down. And so doing it every day in the morning kind of helps set some intention for...
You using an app, or you just like you read some books, or like how do you...
A little bit of both. I mean, I use Headspace personally. I know some people do, some people don't like it.
Yeah.
But I use Headspace. But I've been reading as well, just trying to, add more context to like just what I'm doing and see if I can make it more valuable.
Okay. And then you did say you had a story about a mustard packet related to the race.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into the race. The mustard packet, for those of you who don't know, because I had no idea about this. Apparently, like ultra endurance athletes, mustard or hot sauce is like carrying packets with you in case you start cramping is like a normal thing. Have you ever heard about that? Like people?
No, never.
Yeah, I got a good buddy who's an endurance athlete. His name's Weston Strom. I met him in San Francisco, and he called me a couple days before the race. He said, "Go to your local deli and pick up a mustard packet or two, right, and have them in your pockets in case you start cramping during the race. You're gonna want something really salty to just kind of slam down." And I'll tell you what, that point came during the race where a mustard packet. I'm like running along the train tracks, headed into Minto Brown Park, and I'm just slamming a mustard packet with a Gatorade, and it was pretty disgusting. It was like 90 degrees, and I'm like, this is horrible. but I felt an immediate difference in how my gut was feeling afterwards.
Dang, immediate, like right away.
Yeah, like I was on mile 2 of the run. I had just gotten off the bike. You know, you're kind of getting your land legs about you, and I think part of the difficulty, right? If you're eating 1,500 calories, I ate 1,500 calories on the bike. Like your body's trying to digest all that stuff, and I started to experience some gut cramps, and I took that mustard pack, and it took a few minutes, but then I definitely noticed it kind of cool my cramp out for me.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about the race specifically. So it starts with the swim, right? And you started in Minto, is that right?
Yeah. So we actually had to go down to Riverfront Park, and we had to walk about 1.5 miles out to the race start before it all got kind of kicked off. And that morning, we're kind of in line. It's early. There's a lot of commotion, right? There's a lot of volunteers that were around. The volunteers were amazing. Like, everyone was, like, so helpful and so nice. And I'm standing in line, getting ready to, like, walk over to the swim. And as you can imagine, at one of these events, there's a lot of men and women there. But there's a couple dudes that, like, they do these all the time. And they were, like, the most talkative people all morning, because everyone's pretty nervous. You know, like for me personally, I was pretty nervous.
Sure.
I'm standing next to this dude from South Florida, and you know, we're talking to a volunteer, and he talked about how he flew out to Oregon, you know, a week in advance so he could put some time in the river. He's like, oh, I'm so excited for the swim. I've been putting in the time, and you know, he's like, I've been in here almost every day this week. The volunteer looks at me. She's like, have you been in the river? I was like, nope. I hope to actually never have to have gone in the river. And she's like, you must be from around here, you know, because we all know that river is maybe not the cleanest thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But this guy from South Florida, he was out there like drinking the water. You know, he's got gills when come race day.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So start with the swim, and you know, you were most worried about the swim. Was it as hard as you thought it was going to be? Harder? Not as bad?
It was definitely not as bad as I thought because of the current. The current definitely kicked you down. I swam faster than I had swam in the pool, which kind of shows that I had some help from the water.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then you get out of the swim and you start the bike, right?
Yeah, I got out of the swim, and that feeling was, I mean, I had never done anything like that, like getting out and run, like with my wetsuit, right? Trying to strip it off. We're running up the dock. It was super disorienting, right? Like, it wasn't like I kind of had like I was pretty foggy, you know, and just honestly felt like I was going to puke. You know, like I just didn't feel great getting out of the water. But, you know, I come running up, my parents, my little brother's there, you know, everyone's yelling, gives me a little bit of extra juice. And I'm like, okay.
Sure.
You know, get up there and hop on the bike. And my dad and I had rubber banded, Jimmy rigged all my food to my bike bar, my handle, you know, the night before. So I hop on the bike, got all my food there for me, start throwing it in my back, and just take off on the bike ride. And the bike ride, you know, 56 miles, I don't know about you, Kevin, but I don't typically work out without music.
Sure.
And so 3 hours on the bike with no music was the worst thing I had done.
Is that like a rule?
Yeah, because some of the professionals that were there, they'll have radio, right? They'll have like race teams to let them know, hey, because the top, I'm sure 25 guys and women that were there, they travel around to all of these in the country. Like, they pick out multiple. They're trying to get times for nationals. They know the other people in the race, and so if you're a strong swimmer and you get out of the swim earlier and you're on the bike up front, you want to know how far behind the other people are. And so they no AirPods, no nothing, because they don't want people talking to each other on the radio.
Okay, that makes sense. Wow. So you're going 56 miles, no music.
No music. And I'm like riding by people. I'm trying to talk to people. I'm like, hey, how you feeling? And they're like, can you leave me alone? I'm like suffering right now.
Yeah.
So I was trying to make conversation, and there was a couple people that like wanted to chit chat, but the other thing that is just not really it's a new concept to me as a cyclist. You have to be like, I can't remember, 10 bike lengths behind the person in front of you, because you can't draft. You can't draft off people's like wind, and so not only are you, not listening to any music, but you're like not within proximity to anybody really, because you're 10 bike lengths away. So the bike itself was pretty boring, man, and it was mentally the toughest part, because you're going through Salem out to like Independence Bridge, past Ankeny Winery, out to through Talbot. Like, you're kind of going through some desolate parts of town where there wasn't a lot of people out there. And it started to get really hot, on the bike. You're just out there in the sun.
Yeah, it was like, how hot was it that day? It was super hot, I remember.
Yeah, I think it ended up getting into the mid-90s. I was thankful we started early, but at 10 a.m. it started to feel pretty warm.
How did that have any kind of impact on you in the race? Or besides, I mean, obviously it's going to suck more, but like, it was like, oh man, I better drink more fluids, or like, just trying to make sure I was like some ratio between being hydrated enough that I don't pass out and not overhydrating so I don't have to pull off in the porta potties multiple times. Like, it was somewhere in between. Yeah, which is actually kind of an underrated part of Ironman, right? Like, I mean, you're like, if you, I mean, I've heard lots of stories of people having issues with their bowels, because like your body is just basically, I mean, like, in trauma that entire time. So, if you're also then overhydrating, it can cause a bunch of issues. So anyway, so you get done with the bike ride, you start the run. How are you feeling at that point? Are you like, okay, we're almost there? Are you like, am I going to make it? Like, what are you thinking?
At that point, I felt okay. And I get off the bike. It took me a few minutes in transition. My uncle called me after the race, and he's like ripping into me because I took too long into the transitions. And I was like, hey.
Wait, how did he see that?
You can track, there's an app where you can track people and like,
wow.
Yeah, so it was, because we have ankle bands that track where we're at throughout the race. But we're coming out of the bike. I get going on the run. I'm feeling all right. I go out of the wrong gate, and when I run out of the wrong gate, I'm about half a mile up the road, and I'm running, and some big burly redheaded dude comes running up next to me, and he's like, "Hey man," and I was like, "Hey," he's like, "You're running at a good pace. Can I run with you?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And he goes, "Also, you and I took a wrong turn, and my coach told me that we just got disqualified."
Dang.
So I'm not even really at, like, I'm right around mile marker 1, and I've never ran a half before. My legs are feeling okay, but not great.
Sure.
And some guys like, "Hey man, we're both disqualified." And at that point, mentally, I was like, I had to like kind of black out and go into a different part of myself, because I was like, this is about to suck, and it's not even going to count.
Yeah. Damn. And is that true? Did you get disqualified?
I did.
Dang.
Yeah. And it ended up becoming real, where I got through the finish line, and a race judge, I think they have really good tracking, right? A race judge pulled me aside, and they said, like, "Hey, like, we just wanted to let you know that, like, something's wrong with your tracker. Like, we think you took a wrong turn." I was like, "I've already heard this." I was like, "I've heard that I'm disqualified." And so I go back into the race tent, and I actually ran a lot better of it, or I put together a lot better of a time than I thought. I would have been, without being disqualified, I would have been 44th in my age group, which would have qualified me for the Nationals in St. George, Utah.
Wow.
And so I was really happy with how I performed, but getting disqualified was definitely my own fault, and I just kind of had to own it.
And did that impact? Because I mean, to me, I'm like, I don't give a like, it's an incredible accomplishment. Like, did it have any like of a souring effect for you? Like, man, you know, or were you still just like, man, I just finished a half Ironman?
Yeah, I was definitely on a pretty good high. Like, I was really happy with myself for doing it.
Yeah.
But I don't know about you, Kevin, man. As I have gotten older, whether it be personal or work or athletics or friends or whatever, anytime that I like make a mistake or I do something wrong, it tends to fall from a few certain characteristics of myself, and I keep seeing them over and over again. And particularly, I think I'm a high energy and effort guy, but attention to detail guy, maybe not as much.
Okay. All right.
And so coming out of the wrong gate, man, I was actually more upset that I didn't put the time in to make sure I did the right thing, right? I put the time in to be able to do it, but I missed a small detail, and so I was stoked about the race, but I was kind of kicking myself because I was like, you know what, this is on me. I should have been better.
And what's the long-term plan? I know you said you're trying to do it again next year, but like, is this something where you're trying to qualify for nationals? You'd like to eventually do the one in Hawaii? Like, how are you looking at this now?
Yeah, I think the next thing on my bucket list is just to actually finish. You know, I think I'm thinking about it pretty short term, but I definitely got the bug where like it was a pretty incredible experience to where I'm definitely going to try and see if I can do some more. And, you know, you talk about the original Ironman in Kona, the full one. I'll be honest, man, I don't know how people do that. It seems so hard to put together a full marathon after, like, it just seems like a lot. And to do that much activity, I don't know if I could do that while working a full-time job, because that is a full-time job.
Sure.
But
okay.
But yeah, definitely pretty interested to keep going. One story I didn't tell you though. So I told you about that big red-headed burly guy that came running up on me. So we ended up, because we both got disqualified, we kind of looked at each other. We made like a pact. We're like, you know, let's just get to this. You know, let's just finish it up. We ran together from mile 1 until about mile 10 when he dropped me, because my legs kind of started to give out.
Sure.
And along that run, man, there was times where, like, you know, we're running through every aid station together. I'm going water to the face, ice, down my shirt, grabbing a Gatorade, or grabbing a banana or whatever, and like we're stopping a little bit, but we're working together as a team, and most other people that we ran by were just running individually.
Sure.
But I had like this dude that was like pushing me, right? This guy was in great shape, and a couple times, you know, I'd be behind him and he could hear me like kind of dropping back, and he would turn around and he'd be like, "Hey man, like let's keep it going." And I was like, "Oh, okay." You know, he was holding me accountable. He's kind of motivating me throughout the race. And, you know, at one point he kind of stopped and he asked me, he's like, "Why are you out here, man? Like, what are you doing this for?" You know, and he's asking me like all these deep questions. And it was incredible. I was like, who is this guy? Right? Like, everyone else were out here kind of doing like an individual competition, but I just happened to run into, because I took a wrong turn, I ran into this person that actually motivated me to continue to push. And the mile times that I put out on the run were a lot faster than I thought I was going to do. And like, I think I really attribute it to just like having somebody there with me to kind of lockstep. We were just pushing each other. I get to the end of the race, and I immediately like see my family, see a couple of my friends, and they're like, "Do you know who you were running with?" I was like, "No." That guy that was like motivating me and keeping me like going, I was like, "No, I don't know. He was a great dude though." And they're like, "That's Nat Borchers. He's the most famous person in the entire Ironman. Like, he was a Portland Timbers legend. You know, he won the MLS, like, you know, whatever he won a championship with the Timbers in 2015. He had this big beard. He's like famous." And I checked my phone. A bunch of people were like, "Yo, I saw you running with Nat Borchers." And I'm not saying that like literally in anything like, I'm not saying that for any other reason other than like it was incredible, and I think he almost liked me because he could tell that I was kind of an idiot and I didn't know who he was, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if it was like refreshing or something to him, but an incredible dude. And it was like, because I took a wrong turn, I ended up meeting probably one of the most famous people that was out there that day. And to me, I didn't know he was famous, but I could tell he was a special dude just because he had this like aura around him, and he was really motivating me to just like keep plugging along. So it was that was a pretty cool takeaway from the Ironman for me.
Shout out to Nat Borchers.
Yeah, he's a great dude. We exchanged a few messages on IG, but just like during the race, I'm like, man, I could tell this guy was special. I didn't even know he was famous, but he's definitely famous.
Wow, that's cool. I was trying, like, when you were describing him, like, I don't know, because I don't know who Nat Borchers is either. I'm not an MLS guy, but that's awesome, man. That's cool. Okay, I'm trying to think. Is there anything else we didn't cover? I think that's it, right?
Yeah, I think that's it, man. I appreciate you for having me on. It's been great catching up. I love when you text me yesterday. You're like, I've been going through trying to think about why it is that I even like you. You know, we were kind of bantering over text a little bit. It was just nice to catch up, man. I've always liked you. I always thought you were a great coach at McKay. And so,
thanks, man. Yeah, I'm really trying to figure out when it turned, because, you know, like, I really did. I thought you guys were dirty, you know, and I didn't like the way you guys played. So it's weird to me that at some point I'm like, yeah, but at some point I realized he was cool and I liked him, but I don't really know how that happened. It's not like we...
It definitely wasn't on the basketball court. It had to have been somewhere else.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think where our paths would even cross. I don't know, anyway. But yeah, it was cool, man. It was cool to get caught up. And so you're heading back to the Bay Area soon, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna head back. I'm playing in Hoopla this weekend with my little brother.
Okay.
6 feet and under.
Okay. That's a pretty good squad. Who else is on the team?
I'm not sure I'm gonna get any playing time. You know, my brother told me that I'm probably just kind of Jackie Moonin it, player coach.
Okay.
But it is gonna be Colin Hoon, and then I think Nick Parcell is the third, and I'm the fourth. So I'm hanging around this weekend for Hoopla. Really just excited because it's something my brother loves doing, hooping. You know, he's a great hooper, and I'm excited to be there with him and for him in that moment. But then I'll head back to San Francisco next week.
What's he doing now?
He's an accountant as well. He lives up in Portland. You know, he's a CPA, doing a bit of golfing on the side, but he's doing good.
Okay, nice. All right, well, yeah, man, that was good. If people want to connect, you don't have any footage of the Ironman or anything, right? Like on social media or anything like that?
No, I think I got, people can DM me on IG. I've had a couple people that have reached out just saying like, hey, because, you know, obviously I'm an amateur and take it with a grain of salt. Anything I tell you, it might not even be worth a damn because I didn't even finish the thing. You know?
Sure. You finished. You just got disqualified.
Yeah, I finished. I ran through the thing, but yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like, you know, I got a couple buddies that are running in the Denver or I think I don't know if it's in Boulder. It's a half Ironman coming up this weekend, so I've been talking to them. trying to just give them tips, because I think that ultimately, if you sign up for one of these things, you just want to feel prepared enough that you're going to finish. And to your point earlier, there is a real risk of your body breaking down, or there's a risk of getting cramps or not being able to finish. And I think I can shed some light on just some stuff that I did to help get prepared for that.
Okay. And the guy who does the video editing for me will have your IG on here, but for people that are listening only, what is your IG?
It's just my name. It's just Jake Fohn. And that's Jekefohn. Phone is kind of spelt in a weird way.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, feel free for people to reach out.
All right, cool, man. Well, yeah, thanks for being here. That was good. That was a good time.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate you too, man. I had a great time catching up.
For sure. Okay, hang on one sec.